going to talk to you about our money system and energy and how these two things come together, because really our money system is broken. And our money system is our social contract. It feels real to us, of course. If you run out of money, you end up under a bridge, but it's our social contract, it's our glue, it's our trust. And that trust is being broken. So how do we get there? I love this quote by Da Vinci. This is how I see the world, same as him. He's obviously a very gifted individual compared to me. But you have to realize that everything connects to everything else. And so that's what I do in my work. I connect things. I connect dots, big pictures. I like systems thinking. And I connect these three big E's in my problem definition side of things. It's all in this work. It's in a book called The Crash Course. It's in a video series, same title. But I connect the economy and energy and environment together in one big sort of system. And when you look at it that way, I think things get clear. Things become more obvious. And so that's the work I do in the world. And if that's the problem definition, the question is, well, what do you do about it? That's where the cows come in. So we'll talk about that at the end. So today I'm just going to connect these two things, economy and energy, pull them together. The energy story is going to be the dominant story for the next, well, the rest of our lives, I believe. And so to get there, I'm going to have to do a little math. Kenny, did you tell him there would be no math? You did? Well, there's going to be a little math. Here's the math. It's about a fourth E in this story, and it's about something called exponential growth. And I believe it's essential to understand what this is so that we can share an appreciation of the world we're actually in right now. So Einstein said, yeah, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the universe, right? And he who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. So what is exponential growth? If you had a chart, it's called a hockey stick chart, right? It just trundles along that handle and then it shoots up the blade. And we're surrounded by these exponential charts. The problem is we're all humans. And humans think linearly. People can do amazing things in a linear fashion. They can hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball with a tenth of a second to react because it's coming at them linearly. But even the best batter, who slips on ice on the front stoop, that's not a linear process. You fall as the square, right? This thing happens, and it's surprising. So we're surrounded by surprising stuff. So how do we get our arms around that? I have a thought experiment. It goes like this. We have this park that's going to get ruined. I'm from Boston. I picked this one randomly here, Yankee Stadium, and it's going to get wrecked because what's going to happen is, first we make it watertight, okay? And the second thing that happens is I'm going to handcuff you to the highest row of bleacher seats, okay? And then the third thing is I have this magic eyedropper, and it's magic because every time I put a drop of water out, every minute that drop of water doubles, right? So after 1 minute, we have 2 drops of water. After 2 minutes, we have 4 drops of water. After 5 minutes, we can fill a thimble. So here's the question. You're handcuffed to the highest row of bleacher seats. It's 12 o'clock this afternoon, and I put one of these magic drops down on the pitcher's mound, and the question is, how long do you have to escape from your handcuffs? A few hours? Days, weeks? The answer is you have 50 minutes to escape. And if you're skeptical and you think, hey, Chris looks like a really bad estimator of volumes, and I've underestimated this park by 100%, you can think 1251, okay? That makes you feel better. Actually, that's not the important question. Here's the important question. At what time is this park still 97% empty space, and how many of you realize the seriousness of your predicament? 12:45. This is still 97% empty space. And then in the last 5 minutes, it fills up and it's over. And the reason this is important is because we're surrounded by things that look like this. This is a population chart of humans over many thousands of years. Humans are growing by approximately 1%, 1.5% per year. And that's all you need to have an exponential chart, is something growing by some percentage over a unit of time. What grows by some percentage over a unit of time? Well, how's your mortgage denominated? Percent per year, right? How's the GDP growing? Well, we want X percent, per time, right? So we're surrounded by these charts. Here's a famous one. This is U.S. national debt. I had to staple another bar on there to get the next couple of years in. So we're surrounded by these charts, and we're supposed to pretend as if these charts are just going to be like this forever, and we can just live like this. But you live in an extraordinarily unusual time of history, and this helps explain why, okay? Now, this is all I want you to take from the exponential part, is that they speed up at the end. That's how they work. Things get faster. So if it feels like things are going faster, does it feel like technology is accelerating? It is. It's getting exponentially better. But we have other things that are getting exponentially more difficult, and that's the problem. We're linear creatures. Our systems, our culture, our politicians, our institutions aren't geared for managing change that comes at us with an increasing pace. And so that's the world we live in. Now, what does that have to do with anything? By the way, I'm the guy asking the hard questions. Hey, if this is a pair of scissors, what the hell is this? Huh? How do you talk about this stuff to kids? I don't know. All right, so our system of money then has this, if you could meditate on a single statement, you know, go in the lotus position, think long and hard. This is extraordinary. We loan every dollar into existence. This is how it works. This is how the banking system works. If you don't understand it, go read Creature from Jekyll Island, and it all begins to make sense. That was the book that ripped my covers off and got me started down this path, and it's why I'm here. And I'm sure, you know, Robert Kiyosaki is going to be telling you all about other systems and how they intersect with this, communism, things like that. But every dollar is loaned into existence, and a loan, again, has a principal component, has an interest component. Interest, it's some percent over a unit of time. So we would expect that a money system based on debt-based money would be growing exponentially. Is that true? Well, this is a chart of debt. It's almost a perfectly exponential chart. So that's the debt side, and I put a little yellow mark up there at 100,000. This is in billions, so that's 100 trillion. So we're well on our way to being 100 trillion in debt collectively in this country. That's fine. Debt doesn't matter. It's your income, right? And hey, look, GDP, that's our income in the story. It's been growing exponentially too. No problem, right? The problem comes when you put the two charts on top of each other and you look at this and pretend it's not debt on top and it's not GDP on the bottom. Pretend that's rental income on the bottom and that's the mortgage that you're carrying and refining on a piece of property. The debt has been growing faster than the income, and it's been doing it for about 40 years. That's the problem. This is a problem because our money system is the thing that's enabling and enforcing that growth in that debt. By the way, it has to grow. Well, it doesn't have to. But if it doesn't grow, if the debt in the system isn't constantly growing, you see that little lump right there, that little tiny wiggle in that dot line, in the debt line? That almost destroyed the entire financial system. So our debt system is perfectly happy when it's growing and perfectly unhappy when it's not growing. And that's the issue that we're facing right now. So the only question before us is, well, how can we keep the income part of this growing, and how can it ever catch up with the debt side? Well, it hasn't for decades. And in a recent Senate testimony, answering a question by Cynthia Lummis, Jerome Powell, he threw it right out there. She asked, hey, is our debt sustainable? And he said, well, the problem is that we're on a path here where the debt's growing substantially faster than the economy, and that, by definition, is, in the long run, unsustainable. It's completely obvious. Nobody knows what to do about it. Right? You just saw Joseph talking about the fiscal situation, the fiscal deficit of the United States. That's one part of this story, but we have debt accumulating across all crevices in it, and it is growing a lot faster. He's just talking here about fiscal deficits and debt for the federal government, but this is across all sectors. So it's unsustainable. Well, how does something that's unsustainable end? Right? What forces that? And by the way, he just was recently, just yesterday or day before, was asked about, hey, United States federal government is on track to have 52 trillion in debt on the books by 2033. Are you going to monetize that? And he said, nope, not doing that. He's going to have to, because, hey, Jerome, this you, bro? This is M1. Look what, the entire country through its entire history had about $4 trillion in M1 in the system, and then COVID came along. And by the way, when that happened, I mean, that's $4 trillion in the system that every war fought, every bridge built, every business built, every school attended required about $4 trillion in hot circulating M1 money. And then look what happened there in COVID. And now they're saying, oh, we have to bring inflation down. It looks like we have a labor problem. I think we have a printing problem, but different interpretation. Now, we're getting into one of these times where I actually have to quote Lenin, because we're in one of these periods of time where decades are about to happen in relative weeks. And that's part of that exponential function too. Things persist, systems persist until they change. And that's what we have to look out for. And I believe at those turning points, that's when you can start to feel the social mood change. So when I ask that question, who knows, it feels like people are starting to act a little weird. I think that's because we're sensing this. And I think one of the things people are sensing is that there's this extraordinary period of change upon us. And we don't know how to manage that. And we aren't talking about it at the political level, so it feels completely, it's one of those risks that you can't articulate in a dream almost. So it all comes down to this. This is a chart of global energy consumption across many decades, 1800 on the left, 2019 on the right. And this is all different forms of energy, right? So you got your fossil fuels in there, coal, oil, natural gas, got nuclear. If you can see it, maybe in the back, this will be hard, but there's little smears right on the top there, solar, wind, right? They're tiny. Even though they've been growing by large amounts, solar has now grew 50%, and coal use grew by 3%. The 3% was way bigger than the 50% because it was larger to begin with. Now, the thing I need you to take away from this chart is, what shape is this, right? It's a nonlinear shape. Everybody in power who knows how the world works grew up during that steep part right there when we, as a species on the planet, were just taking more and more and more high, tasty, net energy fossil fuels that have an extraordinary energy return on investment for us. And all of that is why we're in this room and why the economy works, and we should be paying very careful attention to where the prosperity actually comes from, because it comes from the energy. This is the headwaters of prosperity. All the rest are interesting things we do with it. So again, this is a non-linear chart. Now, why do I persist on this so much? Well, this is a chart from my book, and you just take two things, GDP on the y-axis and energy consumption, or oil consumption in this case, across the x-axis. And you notice there's a really tight line here. This starts in 1975 on the left, goes up through 2021, 0.93 R squared, which means if you want to understand how big the economy is, you get 93% explanatory power by answering the question, how much oil was burned? Of course, it makes sense, right? If you want to build something, move something, mine something, manufacture something, cook something, there's oil involved in that somehow. It is the prime feedstock. So we should be really eyes right on what's going on with the oil situation, because energy, in this case oil, it is the economy, not the other way around. So, as Joseph mentioned, we have a little bit of a religion problem going on right now, and by which I mean it's the religion of green energy. It's very clear, this is a New York Times piece, just came out on June 12th, that says, hey, when you actually look at it, you know, the electric grid isn't ready for this energy transition we're going down. Of course it isn't. I mean, that's like simple, like engineering 101. I mean, this shouldn't be a revelation to anybody. It's obvious that our electric grid is not ready for prime time to transition. Now, that doesn't actually faze people in California. They're getting ready to make this transition nonetheless. And this is religion. This is not science. They're just saying, you know what, let's just legislate it. You know what, we'll just make a law, and people will have to drive electric cars. And you know, good thing California's doing that, because here's California's domestic oil production. If you can spot a trend on a chart, get to me, because I'm still a little confused about what this is saying. Not at all. Hey, but to really show that New York is saying, California, here, hold my Bud Light, right? Kathy, thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. I'll be here all week. As part of last week's budget deal, Kathy Hochul, the governor, and the legislature ordered the New York Power Authority to shut down all of its fossil fuel plants in 7 years. This happened. I feel like I'm in a dream. I'm wearing pants, so I guess I'm not, but this is crazy. They're going to shut down their fossil fuel plants, and you know why they're doing that? They said it clearly. They said because this will force us to get on this green energy bandwagon, right? And by 2035, only new cars must also be purely electric, not even hybrid. So they went one better. Now, This is an age-old strategy. This has been used by politicians and leaders many, many times in the past, and it's called burning the boats. It's what Cortez did, landed in South America, burned the boats, so they had no choice but to go forward. It kind of motivated his men. We are in a burning the boats part of this story. I wish I was telling you this is something that might happen, that this is a risk, but it actually happened, right? This just happened. So, prediction, New York is going to absolutely be an enormous amount of trouble going forward, because they're going to pass this. All the utilities are going to, figure out what they're up to. They're going to not be investing in these things. 5, 6, 7 years, New York says, wow, we made a huge mistake. Give us those, can we have those plants right now? And the answer is no, you can't. They take a long time to commission and build. And we may not even have the talent left that knows how to do that stuff if we wipe an industry out as a starting point. So it's pretty serious. Burning the boats. Now, speaking of boats, I think this is kind of how a lot of people see it going on right now. We will see continued exoduses from not just California, but from New York and other places like that. This is a really dangerous ideology. And by the way, as Joseph said, this is not a US thing. I'm picking on the US, that's where I live. You should see what they're doing in Germany. They shut down their last 3 remaining nuclear plants. Again, burn the boat strategy, because if they did that, then maybe they'd get more serious about installing this energy systems that don't work yet. They just don't work. And worse than that, so Joseph, I'm really thankful for him going first, because he gave a lot of things I can skip. He talked about the cost. Let me tell you that it's an impossibility that we're going to be able to build this alternative energy reality, this new green energy nirvana. You know why? Because of the work of Simon Michaud. He says here, hey, if we want to build this thing called alternative green energy paradise, and we're going to need, as Joseph mentioned, steel, aluminum, copper, lithium, we need these things. He asked a simple question. He said, I just circled copper on the top. First column says total metal required to produce the first generation of this new energy world we want to live in, okay? It's going to take 4.5 billion tons of copper, right? It's just a guess. First generation, not even repairing, replacing it for second gen. Okay, well, we're mining 24 million tons per year, so if you divide those two numbers, you come up with, it's going to take 189 years to mine the copper for first generation dreams that Kathy Hochul, New York legislature, California, Germany, and other places are saying this is where we're going, and we're going to burn the boats, and we're going to go there, and they forgot to consult this table. This tells us that we're in deep religion territory, because this is a matter of belief, not science, not simple numbers. This is simple. This is simple math. How about lithium? Look at lithium. To get the lithium we think we need is going to take 1,733 years at current rates of production. So if you want to know, people ask me what I'm bullish on, mining, absolutely, because we're not even remotely ready to move into this new alternative, but we're already burning the boats to get there. So we're going to have to go forward. It's astonishing, isn't it? But it's happening. So now I got to talk real quickly about US oil production, because this is, I think, again, an area of self-deception, self-delusion that's been going on in this country for a long time, and there's a reason for that. It's okay. This is oil imports in the United States. It peaked in 2006. It's been trundling down ever since. We ever so briefly became a net oil exporter again for the first time in decades, right there at the end of this chart in 2019. And people are assuming this is a forever situation. This is how it is. That's how it's going to be. Right? When we look at oil production here, we had a recent peak of 13 million barrels a day in November of 2019. We've clawed all the way back up to 2.7-ish million barrels a day. This is awesome, doing good. I'm a huge fan of the oil and gas businesses. But we have to put this in context. So here's the United States oil production over many decades, and all that green, yellow, and blue is what we would call conventional oil. That's where you stick a straw straight down in the ground, and oil comes out. You get the gushers. That red stuff is what's called tight oil, and that's shale oil. And it's brilliant, it's amazing. I know the people who work in the space. It's extraordinary technology. They drill down 10,000 feet, say in the Bakken Formation in North Dakota, turn that puppy sideways, and drill into a seam of shale that might be as thick as this room. and then go sideways for 8, 9, 10,000 feet, and then frack it, blow it apart. 40 stages, maybe 100, depending on the well. It's astonishing that they can do that. And the problem is that those wells deplete extraordinarily quickly. So this is a chart of different years of drilling and how much oil came out as a result and how fastly that goes away. So I drew a couple purple lines there to mark out what would happen in the 2015 cohort, which is that light blue, if we had just stopped drilling, if we said no more shale drilling. The question being answered here is how much oil would we have in 1 year? And the answer is 45% less coming out of all the shale wells that had been drilled up to that point in time, because they deplete astonishingly quickly, usually about 85% depleted in just 3 years. Cool, but you got to keep drilling them. It's called the Red Queen effect. You know, you run faster and faster just to stay in place. You have to drill more and more and more and more, and then Biden steps in and really started to put a kibosh on that, and also the shale space got some appropriate shareholder religion of their own and decided to start returning money, so less went into capital. Here we are. Now again, this is another way to look at the relationship between energy, or oil in this case, and GDP, or economies. Now what we're doing, GDP up the y-axis, oil across the x. Here, this is just for 2017, just plots of different countries. So if you're a country, you burned X amount of oil and you had Y amount of GDP, and we put you as a dot on this graph. This is an extraordinary, robust, linear relationship. It's one of the tightest economic relationships I know about. The rest of them you kind of have to squint at. This one's right in your face. If you're going to have a higher GDP, you're going to be burning more oil. Period. Just how it is currently. Could it change? Sure, but over many, many decades. What happens if we burn the boats? We'll find out, at least in a couple places. Now, to sort of hammer this home, Germany is now facing again, they don't know what they're going to do for this next year's natural gas. They use natural gas, very energy-intensive things in Germany, right? So what do we got? I don't know, smelting glass, you know, making high-end aluminum alloys for BMW engine blocks, things like that, very energy-intensive businesses. And so now they've said that, hey, may be forced to wind down or even switch off industrial capacity if Ukraine's gas transit agreement isn't renewed. Well, Germany, I don't want to be your politician here, but if you're sending Leopard tanks to fight the person who's supplying your gas, you might want to think that one through, right? It's an astonishing thing to be sending armaments against the person who you are 100% dependent on for the gas you need to continue to be an industrial society while you're shutting your nuclear plants down. You can't make sense of this. You know, Chris, help me make sense of that. I can't. But that's the world we live in right now. It's astonishing. But here we are. And so this is going to have extraordinary, easily predictable consequences. So in North Dakota, I mentioned the Bakken play. It's astonishing. It's already past peak. It looks like it's a done deal. They hit a peak back there in 2019, and they haven't recovered. They probably won't. They've actually drilled through over 60% of what's called their Tier 1 acreage. So if you're in the drilling business, particularly in the shale space, there's really good sweet spots. That's Tier 1. And there's places, it's okay, but not the best, Tier 2. And then there's Tier 3, right? So guess what? Companies, individuals are rational, and so they drill into their Tier 1 acreage first. And right there at that peak is when, roughly speaking, they drilled through about 50% of their Tier 1 acreage. And so we want to keep an eyeball on when is a particular play at about 50% of Tier 1 acreage, because there's not an endless amount of shale basins. There's just a few biggies. You got your Eagle Fords, for gas you got Fayetteville, Barnett, you got Marcellus, you got the Permian, which is the biggest oil play in the United States and a world champion, all that. But North Dakota was this play called the Scoop. Again, they drilled out about 50% there in 2019. So those two are already past what we call past peak. Now, it's all about the Permian. This is New Mexico's output through the Permian. It's astonishing. Look at that. That's amazing. We're going to get more growth out of that. Because the Permian right now, and this is Texas's contribution in the Permian side, Texas is about, the whole Permian right now is about 45% through the Tier 1. Which means that if you talk to the people who are actually in the space, have those acreages, they say, around 2025, that's it. We sort of hit a peak, and then it trundles along, doesn't go down, but trundles along for a while, and then begins to go down. So 2025 is my mark in the sand where I say that's about the time the United States maybe wakes up and says, oh, maybe this wasn't a forever thing, this shale play. It was actually a really intense, a really amazing, a really fun thing, but we should have been using that to fund whatever the next energy play was going to be, and we're not doing that. You know who is doing that? Is China. China is making extraordinary inroads with the places that actually have oil, and they're doing it with checkbook diplomacy instead of gunboat diplomacy, and that is, it's just different strategy, right? But China brokering deals between Iran and Saudi Arabia is astonishing, right? That was an amazing thing that just happened a couple months ago. So it's all about the Permian, and we should be very, very aware of that, because here's what happens. Gering, and I don't know how to pronounce that second name, Rosenquadge? I don't know, I should learn. But they put this extraordinary report out, and there's a link down there, where they go through all of this analysis, field by field, piece by piece. They've got a model, and they say, look here at the Barnett and the Fayetteville. These are gas plays primarily, and you can clearly see what looks like almost ideal peak oil, or in this case, peak gas sort of charts, right? They go up, they hit a peak, and they come back down again, and no matter how much you drill in them, that's it. And that's just the nature of these fields. So these two already passed peak. Now, the Bakken and the Eagle Ford, those both in their models, they say, yeah, these are past peak. And they started running things, and they discovered it's about understanding that tier 1 acreage. And so those are past peak. So we really ought to be asking what's going on with the Permian. Because that's it. That's we'll still keep drilling. I'm not saying this stuff runs out, but this idea of getting more and more is amazing. Now remember that chart I showed you that showed the United States went from importing about 13 million barrels a day all the way down to 0, very rapidly. The United States Energy Information Agency, bless their hearts, and I mean that in the southern way, has their models out that shows the United States continuing to produce 12.5 million barrels a day from its shale plays for the next 35 years. And I talk to the people in the shale space, and they say it's about 2 more where we get to hold that up, and then things begin to nose over. You couldn't have a larger gap, right? I don't know what to go with, but I always trust the people on the ground who actually put the holes in the ground and own the acreage more than the people, analyzing it. All right, meanwhile, thank you, Joe. This is our strategic petroleum reserve across many decades, and it's been absolutely plundered. This is the first US president in all of history that has been day trading gasoline prices for political purposes. But our strategic petroleum reserve turned out to be a political petroleum reserve. It's not been strategic. So whatever's coming next, we're coming into it with the same amount of oil that we had in the strategic petroleum reserve as 1985. A long time ago, right? So this is an astonishing thing. If I was running this ship, I would want to be coming into this next period of time with the most amount of inventory we possibly could. And that would be inventory in the ground that we knew about, inventory in storage like this, but that's not the situation. So when I'm asked to talk here about the relationship between economy and energy, oil is the economy. The United States is coming into this next period, my prediction's around 2025 again, give or take, and we're gonna suddenly say, oh, we don't have all the oil we need anymore, we're gonna have to import that. Well, who are we importing against? This is China's imports of oil. And this is a Bloomberg article. This is an astonishing thing. They are now importing 16 million barrels a day, and this chart only went up through early 2023, but we just got more data that says, this just came out on June 13th, China increased its oil imports by 20% year over year for this most recent quarter. Now, why would they be doing that? Maybe they need it. Maybe they're stockpiling it for some reasons. I don't know if you saw, but a Republican senator, Marco Rubio, and a Democratic senator got together and passed some legislation out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that said that the United States is going to, they're asking US agencies to get ready for how they will support Taiwan if China attacks Taiwan in any way. And that included kinetic, but also if they felt like their telecommunications were compromised or shipping or anything, well, like a whole lot of reasons. So you can feel the drumbeat is here again, and if we go into a war situation, oil shipping stops right away, and the United States suddenly discovers what it actually has or doesn't have in its cupboards, and that's when the world changes, and it could change very, very rapidly in this situation. Now, China's exposed. They don't want this. We're exposed. I don't think we want it, but we don't seem to have cooler heads, right? They're burning the boats, right? There are people in power right now who are saying, yeah, you know what? Let's do this. Let's make oil really expensive because that'll force people buying electric cars or whatever the fantasy is, right? And it's really disconnected. So with all of this, we absolutely need our money system. We have a debt-based money system that's growing, growing, growing. It needs to grow. If it hiccups, things get really dodgy. That growth comes from oil itself, and we have this extraordinary period in front of us where you should really have all eyes on what's going on with the global oil situation, because oil's a global commodity. All right, so with all of that, what do you do? Well, I don't know, but here's what I do. I think about wealth now, not in terms of dollars, but in terms of primary wealth, secondary wealth, and then tertiary wealth is all the markers on it. It's derivatives, it's currency, it's stuff like that, but they're just claims, right? Money is just a claim. If I have money, I like it because I can go get a Starbucks with it or buy some gasoline. I can do something with it. But that Starbucks coffee, that gasoline, that's secondary wealth. Primary wealth is the base of all of this, which is the resources you actually have access to in your country. So this is good, thick, rich soils, it's abundant fisheries, it's forest land, it's rich mineral ores, things like that. And the primary wealth in this story is getting harder and harder to come by. If you talk to people in mining, ore grades are declining, oil is getting harder to find, things like that, right? So if you understand this chart, every wealth transfer in the past when currency systems have failed, so that could be Weimar Germany, that could be, back in the day, this could be Venezuela today, Argentina today, very bad down there what's happening. People are discovering very, very rapidly that the claims aren't what's important. And when the dust settles, you'll find out huge swaths of the population got destroyed, and they'll write books and say, oh, the middle class, their wealth was destroyed. It got transferred. It's an important concept because the wealth didn't change. Primary, secondary wealth is what it is, the means of production and the resources to drive it. That is always wealth, always has been. Now, who owns that is going to change. And we know the WEF, the Davos crowd, they're working very hard to make sure that this great reset button gets hit. And at the end of it, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, right? They're very open about it, right? Maya Angelou says, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them the first time. I'm working on it, right? I believe them, and they also told us Western values will be under assault. I believe them. Because if something happens and somebody says they were going to do it, I'm going to think maybe they did it. It's a theory I'm working on. All right, so what does that actually mean, primary, secondary wealth? For me, it's hard assets. I just love hard assets at this point. It's a way to sort of dodge things. I love oil wells. I love oil. I love energy in this story. I love gold and silver, other metals as well. So this is just a placeholder for all kinds of metals. Copper. If you read the copper story right now, on a fundamental basis, we are so short over the next set of years. It's astonishing. As well, good real estate. You know much more about that than I do. I include in my real estate listings trees. I own a lot of trees. I consider these BTUs on the hoof. I'm convinced that we're going to be using these things again for energy. In Germany, during the first gas crisis they had about a year ago, they had thefts of firewood off of people's porches. Because a cord of firewood, if you know what that is, 8 by 8 by 4 by 4. A cord went from about $200 to $2,000. So that'll happen again, because trust me, we like our energy as humans. I like tractors. They could be off-road vehicles, Kenny. Whatever, it's all good. And gardens, or you know the people who are growing your food. These are the things I love right now, and many other reflections of this. I'm just giving you some ideas. So if you want to find me later and talk about these things, I just love hard assets at this stage because it's a means of avoiding the wealth transfer. Because nothing's going to change. If or when the dollar loses its reserve currency status, the petrodollar takes it, oil shoots up vastly in price, the value of these things doesn't change. They all are worth exactly the same ratio to each other that they were before your currency failed and after. What happened was we just have to change our frame of mind away from using the marker as the actual definition of truth, and understand the truth is over here with these things. So this is what Evie and I have done. This is an actual picture of our cows, so I promised you there'd be cows. So we're just doing what we can now to, our wealth includes building the soil up in our field, making sure the cows are happy. We like doing this, not everybody does, but this is our approach. And it feels like a way we can begin to manage the risks that we're facing. And so if you like me, look at this data and go, yeah, this is looks reasonable, I should look into this more, do all your own research. I'm a big believer in that, right? But if it comes back up for you, you're like, yeah, this is kind of weird that oil's this important and we're not talking about it at all. Maybe I should have some plans for what to do if that transpires. And so that's a really, really big risk we're facing right now. And the thing about facing a big risk is it's not, for most people, myself included, it's not a rational, logical process. It's an emotional process. And when I face a big risk, what happens is I have to go through an adjustment reaction, right? So if my doctor said, hey, you got a lump over here, I'm going to go through an emotional reaction, right? It's going to be an adjustment reaction, right? And an adjustment reaction is a weird thing because everybody goes through them at different paces. Some people are fast adjusters, some are slow, and that's fine. But no matter who you are on that process, when you do finally take the adjustment, you say, okay, this looks real, I better do something with my money, I better think about wealth differently. Anything you do in advance of that risk coming is going to feel like a complete overreaction. After the fact, looking back, you're going to realize it was a complete underreaction. And that's the nature of coming into a time when you have these extraordinary changes that aren't linear, right? We can all adjust to a slight bend in the road, but going 100 miles an hour and it's a hard turn, you can't adjust. So that's the story I have to tell, and I'm really grateful, Kenny, for the invite to come here and tell it. Thank you for all of your attention on this, and I hope you got something from it. Thank you.